What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Coffee with Rob, and a slightly different setup today. We've got the whiteboard out, my coffee is there ready to go, and I'm excited to speak to you about how to calculate your calories for fat loss. Now before we dive into the video, let me make you aware that there's two ways you can use this video. You could follow along with me and enter in your information as you go, pausing the video at various points, and at the end of the video you'll have an idea of how many calories you need to eat specifically for you based on your activity levels in order to lose fat. However, you could watch the video from start till finish, get all the information you need, and then click the link in the description, which will take you to a Word document, which is one sheet long, and it walks you through each of these three simple steps, tells you a little bit more about the particular topic, and it tells you a little bit more of why you're doing it and how to do it. So it's completely up to you how you use this video. Before we dive into this, and I certainly don't want this to put you off, I want you to understand that there is no perfect approach. However, I found this approach to work extremely well with the vast majority of people I've worked with, simply because it takes into account the amount of exercise that they do per week. It also is realistic in the expectations of how deep of a caloric deficit that I want my clients to go into. And the vast majority of people I've worked with find this extremely helpful, even though it does look like a lot of information, but trust me, this is a very simple approach. So this approach will help you lose fat, improve your relationship with food, and also allow you to live a little bit as well. Include a bit of chocolate here and there, and include your crisps if you want to. As long as you stay within your caloric number, you will lose fat. Now, diving straight in. Before we look at this big long formula, there are easier ways to do this. You could go onto a calorie counter on the internet and type in a bit of information and get a number spat back out with you. However, this is exactly the formula I use with clients, and I wanted to share it with you because at least if you've used it once, you know exactly what to do if you need to recalculate your calories in the future. So before we dive into everything, I want to talk to you about BMR. BMR is your basal metabolic rate, and that's just a fancy way of saying how many calories you burn at rest. I call them coma calories because people remember that, but a less crude way is, say for example, your alarm goes off, you stop your alarm and you just lay there all day and didn't move. That's how many calories you burn just being a human. And what the mistake people make is they calculate their BMR and then they eat that. Say, oh, 1500 calories, sweet, that's my BMR, I'm going to eat that now and I'm going to lose weight. However, for a lot of people, that's too low. Based on their activity levels, that's too low. And what they do is they can't stay consistent with it. And like I said, this approach, and I've said in previous videos, this whole approach is about creating sustainable fat loss. It's not a rapid fat loss protocol. We're looking at creating sustainable fat loss so you can achieve the results you truly want, and the results will stay with you over time. And even if you do end up putting a bit of weight on, say over Christmas or holidays, you can just go back to this method and it will work like a treat if you stay consistent with it. So, our BMR, like I said, is a fancy way of saying how many calories you burn at rest. I don't want you to eat to your BMR. So what you can do to calculate your BMR is you times your weight in kg by 10, then plus 6.25 by your height in centimeters, then minus 5 times your age in years, obviously. And then if you're a man or a woman, it's different. So you take this number here and then either plus 5 or minus 161, and then you'll get a number. Now it'll be more specific than 1500 calories, but just for the sake of the video, let's stick with 1500 calories. You take that number and then we go to step number 2. That's your TDEE. That's your total daily energy expenditure. And that's again just a fancy way of saying how many calories you burn when you take into account your BMR, you being a human, and then add on how many steps you do at work and how much exercise you do across the day or across the week. So, taking in structured exercise and steps, we take our BMR, as I said, do not eat to your BMR, times it by one of these numbers. Now, these numbers and this scale is better explained in the document below. All you'll really need to know in this video is this is someone who is very inactive, and this is someone who trains twice a day and goes hard. Okay? So, I want you to take your number and then times it by one of these. For the sake of the video, I've taken 1500 calories, times it by 1.375 and got about 2000 calories. It's actually 2069, but I rounded down to 2000 calories. Now, if you've done that, or whether you're doing it with the sheet below, you have your total daily energy expenditure. That is your exercise and steps included. a massive important point. I don't want you to eat back calories. So say you have your total daily energy expenditure, okay, and you've calculated that. The biggest problem people make is that they go to a spinning class and their watch says that they burned 500 calories, so then they eat back 500 calories. I don't want you to eat back calories. Your TDEE calculates your exercise and steps and puts that into the account already. It's already accounted for, so I would avoid eating back calories. And then we move into the simplest step of them all, which is calculating your caloric deficit. And we have three methods. Of course, there's more percentages you can use, but the three most common are either 10, 15, or 20. Now, as you can see, my beautiful smiley faces on the bottom of the whiteboard simply says how happy you're going to be on each one. So if you go light and you go a 10% deficit, bear in mind, this is not a caloric deficit yet. This is your total daily energy expenditure. This is how many calories you need to maintain your current weight. We haven't even looked at weight loss yet. So this is your maintenance number. So all you do is take your maintenance number, come over to step number 3, and either apply a 10, 15, or 20% deficit to that number. I would recommend 10%, simply because the deeper of a deficit you're in, the less consistent you'll be, because you'll be you won't give yourself enough calories to eat, and then you won't be able to stay consistent over time, and you'll say screw this and then eat all around you. Okay? The deeper of a deficit you're in, the more of a chance you'll lose muscle along the way. And we want to retain as much muscle as possible, because when we do lose that body fat, we want to have some shape too. And then also, the deeper a deficit, the sooner you'll quit, the more likely you're actually going to say, no, this is too much of a diet. So I would actually advise you to go 10% to start with, because over time, when you start to lose body fat and you start to get great results, you may need to go deeper in your deficit, slightly deeper, like 15%. So if you go deep straight away, you haven't really got a chance as the weeks go by. So I would be very light with your deficit at the start, and I would go 10%, and 10% of 2,000 is 1,800. Quick maths. Okay, so that is your caloric deficit, and that's the calories that you can eat every day to lose body fat over time, because it's lower than your maintenance number, and that's the key. If it's lower than your maintenance number, you will lose body fat, but there's a fine line between being realistic and being completely unrealistic. So if you were to cut this in half and have a 50% caloric deficit, then you're not going to stay consistent with it. You're going to lose a ton of muscle, and you're just going to be very miserable. Like I said, you're going to be very, very miserable throughout this whole process, and that's not what it's about. You have to adopt an approach you could probably see yourself doing a year from now. So guys, I hope you found that video useful. I really, really do. If you have any questions, drop them below. And just before you go, if you would like to learn how to, if this just seems like too much, or you've tried this before and you haven't been able to stay consistent with it, if you'd like to learn how to do this, or lose body fat without counting calories, just click the link below. I made a video on how to lose body fat without counting calories. I hope you can join us tomorrow when I speak about protein, carbs and fats, and your macro split, and how you should structure that if you want to lose body fat. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you tomorrow.